My parents forced me to give all my savings to my sister to help her pay for a house, or else they would kick me out immediately. After that, I revealed their struggles online, and now they keep calling me nonstop. To put things in perspective, my dad left his position a few years ago to launch a new company. Regretfully, COVID struck about that time, preventing his firm from flourishing as he had hoped. However, he persisted in working hard on it and never gave up hope. He's still doing it too, and they are improving, albeit slowly. That's wonderful news for him then. However, it also implies that for a very long period, we lacked the resources to support our way of life. Since my mother has always preferred to be a stay-at-home mother, it was impossible for her to begin working because that was not what she desired. Additionally, our parents informed us that we needed to learn how to support ourselves. They would help us until we became 18, but then it would be hard for them to take care of us and save money for their own retirement. They had already depleted a sizable portion of their resources to allow us to continue living as usual throughout the lockdown and other circumstances. Thus, a few weeks ago, my sister and I became 18, and we were expected to take care of ourselves. Since I am currently 18 years old and have finally completed my high school education, I was aware that I would be responsible for paying for my own college education. I had saved the money from that since I had worked since I was 16 and completed a few internships, so I had everything worked out. Even if it wasn't enough to pay for college, I could still manage if I took out a student loan. At the age of 22, my sister recently received her diploma. She didn't have any savings of her own, but she had also taken out a student loan. She chose not to work even during her time in college, and that is entirely her decision. I'm not going to hold it against her, but I will hold her accountable for expecting me, her younger brother, to pay her first house's rent. She is moving out of my parents' house for work, and she is getting a house with a few of her high school friends, all of whom have paid their dues. However, she is only a few $1,000s short of what is anticipated of her. It would also be extremely embarrassing for her to inform her friends that her family isn't exactly wealthy at the moment. Though if they are actually her friends, I really don't understand that. In any case, why would they judge her? Because of this, her friends are unable to support her at this time, and she will have to reimburse them later. My parents have previously informed us that we shouldn't expect any kind of financial assistance from them once we turn 18. That leaves me then. The worst part is that she told our parents that she needed the money and asked them to speak with me instead of approaching me directly to ask for it. Full disclosure, my sister and I don't really get along well. We are just really different, and I was kind of glad when she told us that she would be moving out, because having her move back in after she graduated from college for a couple of weeks until she found a job was pretty tiring for me. Last week when this happened, we were all living together. I'm going to start college in a couple of months, and I already have my uncle and aunt who have signed off on the loan, and my sister was supposed to move out a couple of days back, although I don't really know what happened with that. 3 days before she was supposed to move out, my parents came to my room and told me about how she was just short of a couple of $1,000s, and they knew that I had been saving money for college, so they wanted me to just dip into those savings for this and help my sister out. They even reassured me that she would pay me back at the earliest, even though she could have just spoken to me herself, and that would have been much more respectful. To be honest, I didn't even know how she could afford the rent at all because from what I know, she hadn't worked a day, and I didn't think that she had any savings of her own, but apparently she did. It was just not enough though. But that was not my problem, and I told my parents that it was her own fault, that she hadn't worked when she was in college, even though she knew that our parents would not be supporting us as adults. Now, her not being able to afford rent for her first house was a problem that she herself had created, and she was going to have to deal with this on her own. Besides, covering my college expenses was way more important than her being able to move into a house with her friends. I thought that my parents would be reasonable enough and understand why I did not want to share my savings with her, because so far, they have never been the kind of parents who have treated my sister and I differently. But instead, they started throwing a fit about how I was acting and told me that I was being really selfish. They had imagined that it would be easy enough to convince me. I don't know why, and when I refused to assist her out, they started fighting with me after an extremely severe disagreement with my parents on this. My dad just snapped at one point and he told me that if I was going to be selfish and not share my funds with my sister, then that would just mean that I did not appreciate my family as much as they had expected me to. So then even they would behave the same way with me and be selfish and ask me to leave the house. Basically, my only two options were to either help my sister out and share my savings with her, or get tossed out. I chose the second choice because honestly, that was pretty humiliating for me. I had never anticipated my parents to exploit the fact that I was reliant on them for a while, at least until I made it to college against me. But I assume their priority was my sister right now, and I'm not sure, but I think it was because they didn't want others to know that our family hasn't been doing well financially. And if my sister had been honest with her pals and I'd have them cover for her, she would have had to tell them all about our financial position. And since these are her pals from high school, their parents would have found out as well. And their parents know my parents very well, as it's a pretty tiny, well-knit community. So I believe that's why they did not want my sister notifying anyone about what was going on. In reality, they had put in a lot of effort into hiding the fact that we were struggling financially. Not even everyone in the family knew about it, save for my uncle and his wife. My uncle is my dad's older brother, and as he had been one of the earliest investors in my dad's firm, of course he knows about it. Initially, my dad had even been against the notion of my having my uncle become a co-signer on the loan application, but had to agree with it eventually, given that co-signing my sisters and my applications together can have unintended consequences. He had to allow me to go to my uncle for assistance even though he did not enjoy the thought of owing him even more money. It wasn't even as though I was attending a local college. It was going to be even more expensive because I was going out of state for college. Nevertheless, I was aware of how important their reputation was to them and that they would do everything in their power to keep their struggles from being discovered. I also left home following my argument with my folks. The fact that they had just thrown me out for not following their rules still didn't sit well with me. I chose to use the fact that their reputation and the money meant so much to them because it was offensive and dehumanizing. I quickly began packing after that disagreement, and my parents did not try to stop me at all. Even that particular evening, after gathering everything I would need and stuffing it into a suitcase, I called a cab to travel to my uncle's house. Although I felt a little bad for bothering him all the time, he informed me that I could stay with him and his wife for as long as I wanted to once I arrived, and explained the circumstances. Since their children have grown up and are on their own, I'm currently residing in my cousin's room. My parents were waiting for me at the door as I left, but they made no attempt to stop me. Even after my uncle gave my father a call to discuss my situation with him, my dad made it abundantly evident that I would not be welcome in their home if I was not going to prioritize my family. Ironically, I felt that they were the ones being selfish when they were accusing me of being so. I've been staying with my uncle for the past week, and while they've been pleasant enough, it hasn't helped me decompress. My aunt and uncle never stop assuring me that everything will work out, and that they have no doubt my parents would finally realize their error and offer me an apology. However, I'm not so sure now, and last night I was feeling especially depressed. I'm not sure what got to me, but I just felt like I needed to talk about it. In addition, I was feeling very resentful. I therefore made the decision to post on Facebook and spill all the tea instead of venting to my buddies. I fully exposed my parents by typing out a post that included every single detail of what had happened. I clicked the post button after that. I knew my parents would cease blowing up my phone as soon as I found out about the post. So I put my phone aside after that and went for a walk. I had been waiting for them to get in touch with me, so I hadn't blocked them anywhere yet. However, they had not even bothered to check on me throughout the previous week. Upon returning home from my walk after 30 minutes, my aunt and uncle greeted me with serious looks and informed me that they had seen my post and felt it was not appropriate at this time. But all I could do was apologize to them for not telling them because I had already uploaded it without even talking to them about it. However, I was really experiencing extreme depression and wanted to find a way to exact revenge on my parents. They didn't say anything, but they appeared a little disappointed, so at least that's a plus. However, as I had anticipated, when I returned to my phone, I saw that I had missed multiple texts and calls from my parents. All of the texts said the same thing. They were right to ask me to leave the house, since it was clearly clear that I was genuinely selfish and that I was just thinking about myself. And I demonstrated that I was a horrible person with this post. They were saying that I had ruined their reputation by making it seem like they were the bad guys, and that I had left on purpose, even though I had chosen to go because I would rather not stand up for my family when they needed me than do the honorable thing and support them. The majority of the messages were rather angry, and I felt somewhat vindicated because, at least for now, they understood how deceived and disappointed I had felt during the previous week. Then, as I was going through the messages, my mother called again, and this time, I decided to answer. She was crying like someone had died, and I could hear my dad yelling at me in the background, so I regretted answering the phone right away. My mother was trying to talk to me through tears as he was swearing at me. Although it was a little difficult to understand, I managed to deduce that she was attempting to persuade me to remove the post because many of our relatives had messaged them, telling them it was inappropriate for them to try to compel me to provide financial support because I was still very young and needed to focus on my own future. Moreover, they were attempting to steal money from one ticket and give it to the other, rather than aiding that daughter. Furthermore, that was unfair. My mother was attempting to give the impression that I had not shared the full story in my piece, and that I had presented the narrative in a way that cast them as the antagonists. However, to be honest, I had merely expressed my viewpoint. And because this is social media, I don't think it was my fault that our family disagreed with their actions. I'm free to disclose anything I want, but at least I was honest enough to tell the whole story and not withhold any information. Nevertheless, my mother began to remind me that if I was recounting my side of the story, I also ought to have mentioned how they had always helped my sister and me when it was feasible for them, but that now they were just depending on us to assist one another because it was hard for them to do so. She asked me to write a piece detailing how lavishly we lived while our father was providing for us, and when I realized it was true, I became extremely guilty. My sister and I had been lavished with attention by our parents, who had done everything within their power to ensure our well-being. When my father had a large income, even yet, I don't think that justifies the kind of behavior I've just encountered. Most significantly, even though I understood that the last thing they wanted was for people to know that they were having financial difficulties, I chose to make this information public, which infuriated my parents. I'm still feeling bad about the talk I had with my parents last night, and even the way my uncle and aunt are acting, despite the fact that I've received a lot of love and support from family and friends on social media. I should just remove that post, because it's making me feel horrible about what I did. I just wanted to be sure that I'm truly at fault before I take that action. Furthermore, I'm not the only one who was tricked into believing I did anything wrong. I hereby apologize for posting a social media post that revealed my parents' financial hardship. Edit: I haven't had a nice relationship with my sister in a very long time. When we were younger, we used to be close, but she's been acting strangely for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm not quite sure why. Perhaps it's because of her buddies. Based on the one I've met, they're all quite cruel and sarcastic. Additionally, even though she didn't harass my friends or me in school, I am aware that she had a bad reputation for doing so. And to be honest, I just can't stand bullies, which is part of the reason I don't get along with her anymore. I'm not sure that the significant changes she has undergone are for the best. We don't even talk much these days. And I remember feeling strange that day when she chose to send our parents to talk to me about taking out a loan, even though we weren't exactly on speaking terms and she could have approached me directly. To be honest, I might have even given her permission to borrow the money if she had approached me directly. She's been acting extremely strangely lately, and has been strange about a number of things. I don't really talk to her anymore because of her awful attitude problem. First update. Hey, so there were differing views in the comments, so in the end I simply followed my instinct. Even though my relatives had given me a lot of support, the post didn't really signify anything, so I removed it. It was not as if anyone had gotten in touch with me. It was only surface-level support, and I was aware that nobody had contacted me, not even the ones who had contacted my parents to inform them that what they were doing was unfair. Therefore, it was clear that criticizing my parents' actions was more important to them than truly supporting the individual who had experienced a difficult situation. All these people wanted was to feel included and part of the drama. I removed that post as a result of getting even with my parents. Thus, the goal had been achieved. I last communicated with them 4 days ago, and this morning I removed the post. After that, I felt that I owed my uncle and aunt an explanation even more than I did my parents. So I made the decision to patch things up with them. To the best of their abilities, they had tried to support me, but I hadn't even spoken to them before posting that. We had a somewhat strange relationship because I knew they disagreed with my strategy. In order to surprise them, I got up really early today, removed the post, and then made breakfast for them. They were quite taken aback, and they assured me it was okay when I apologized for not talking to them. The post had just caught them off guard. They also expressed regret to me for their strange behavior following that post, saying they were at a loss for words or actions to help me feel better. I believe there was a minor miscommunication between us, which we resolved to discuss. I informed them that, despite my gratitude for their support, I felt compelled to get revenge on my parents since I had been feeling so hurt and embarrassed by their treatment of me. They informed me that while they understood why I had done what I had done, they didn't necessarily agree with the route I had taken by publishing about it online for everyone to see. And maybe it wasn't the best thing to do, but I had to get it out of my system. They informed me that many family members couldn't take my uncle and dad's fantastic lives in contrast to their own, and as a result, many of them were quite envious of them. Therefore, it made sense for them to be happy that my dad was having difficulties. He didn't want any of this information to leak, in part because of this. That clarified why so many of my relatives had left me such encouraging remarks on Facebook, but had not made the effort to get in touch. They couldn't care less about what I was going through, but they were thrilled about my dad's fall from grace. Nevertheless, I informed them that I had removed that post after learning my lesson. Then they told me that since I had always been a wonderful kid and greatly resembled their own 2 kids, they would be more than delighted to have me over. When they mentioned that, I made the decision to let them know that I was also quite angry with my sister, because in the end, I think that's what caused my parents and I to argue that day in the first place. I was angry that she hadn't approached me directly to request the money. To be honest, I wasn't expecting an explanation for that. Since I hadn't previously told them about this and hadn't included it in my post, I was just venting to them. However, they appeared astonished when I informed them that our parents had been sent to me by my sister to request the money. I asked them what was bothering them because it was obvious they knew something. And they said they didn't understand why my sister had felt the need to ask my parents for money to pay the rent when she had already asked them to send her some, and they believed they had taken care of everything. It was then my turn to seem startled, as I had no idea about any of that. I learned that even though my sister had been attending college, she was aware that her parents could not afford to support her after talking to them about it for a little while longer. She had been depending on my uncle and aunt, so she would call them whenever she needed something. The student loan only paid for all of the costs associated with attending college. Naturally, people also have additional expenses, which my uncle and aunt paid for. My sister had promised them that she would repay them as soon as she had enough money, so they had never told me about it. She had wanted it to remain a secret, and a few weeks earlier, she had contacted them to request a few $1,000s since she and her pals were moving into a new home, and she wanted to pay her portion of the rent. She informed them that she would begin repaying them immediately, and they gladly agreed to assist her now that she was employed. I'm now genuinely perplexed as to why my sister approached me for money when she had already borrowed it from my uncle to pay their rent. It's just not adding up. And at this moment, not even my aunt and uncle had any answers. They could have a conversation with themselves to resolve this, but they believe it would be best if I spoke with her directly, as we obviously have a lot on our minds and would like to put this behind us. And because this seems very suspicious, I suppose that's precisely what I'll have to do if I want to learn what's going on. Update 2. It has been 2 days since my last post, and I finally made the decision to talk to my sister since I knew that was the only way to find out the truth. I texted her asking if she would be willing to talk to me, and she readily consented because neither she nor I had blocked each other. We had a lengthy conversation over the phone last night since, as it turned out, I don't think she was at fault in any of this. It seems that she had indeed borrowed a small amount of money from our uncle to help with the rent. However, one of her friends abruptly decided that she would be living with her boyfriend rather than her friends, which meant that extra money would need to be contributed at the end because one of them had abandoned the plan. This put her in a difficult situation because the house they were going to rent was fairly expensive. She told me that she had requested our parents to assist her with the money directly after deciding to ask for their assistance just once. She didn't even know why they had done it, as she hadn't instructed them to ask me. Until last night, when I told her about it, they had came to me asking for the money. It seems that my parents had informed her that the reason for our argument was that I had asked them for money to increase my college funds, and they had declined, so my sister had purchased it. She was astonished to learn the true cause behind my fight with our parents, as she was unaware of it beforehand. We were able to surmise that our parents had most likely not wanted to give her money out of their own wallets in order to assist her. They came to me and pretended that she was pleading with me for assistance. After we resolved that, we discussed our personal relationships with our siblings. I made the decision to be open and honest with her, telling her that I had cut off contact with her because she had undergone significant personal transformation, was cruel, and even started acting like a bully. I was prepared for her to dispute it and for us to argue, but instead of doing so, she accepted it and said that, although she had been a horrible high school student, she had improved significantly in college, and that she wanted to improve our relationship as well. She didn't think it would work though, even if she attempted to talk to me, because I just seemed so closed off, since it was clear that our parents had tried to exploit the fact that we don't get along to their advantage and pit us against one another. We made the decision to move on from the past and try to make things right for the sake of the future. For the curious, she was able to move into the new house with her pals, and she had to invent a very weak justification for why she could only bring a portion of the rent with her. They were able to determine what was happening with the money despite my post, and they volunteered to cover for her until she could reimburse them. Furthermore, she was wrong to think that her friends were passing judgment on her. Bravo to them for that. Nevertheless, I was able to determine the truth about what had transpired and, as an added bonus, I managed to reconcile with my sister. Thus, I'm content with the state of affairs at the moment. I haven't spoken to my parents in a while, and based on what I recently learned, I doubt that we will be able to communicate anytime soon. To be honest, I think my sister is probably going to cease talking to them. 3 updates. Guys, I just started college and I'm in love with it already. My parents have blocked me and it has been a good few months since I last chatted with them. Given their behavior, I should have been the one to block them. Therefore, I'm not sure why they blocked me. In any case, my sister has stopped communicating with them ever since she discovered the truth about the events involving my parents and me. However, we are making a conscious effort to mend our connection and become the siblings we once were. It's going incredibly well, so far as I can tell, and I'm really thrilled about that. It's clear that my uncle and aunt have stayed in touch with me, and one of my cousins is a really happy coincidence. Recently, one of their kids began working on a project that will need him to visit my state frequently. I don't even really miss my parents anymore, and I'm going to visit him relatively soon. While I do hope that we could resolve our differences in the future, for now, I'm content with this.